I watched The Office Australia, so you don't have to. Here's my review. It's tough to know where to start with this review because I imagine a lot of people don't necessarily know that it exists. For context, The Office is a huge franchise across the world. The UK office has its loyal fans, the US office has its loyal fans, and now it's the Australians' turn to create their own version of this franchise. Yes, that's right, the 13th version of The Office is now out and is available on Amazon Prime. And interestingly, this version is predominantly female led. Now, I've been interested about this version for a while. I put it in my calendar a long time ago when they announced it was coming out. And so as soon as it came out, I was there, I was watching it, and you know what? It's actually not as bad as I thought it might be. I think it was always going to have a tough time off the bat with critics and fans because the US office was huge in sort of defining American sitcom comedy for the time that it was on, and a lot of fans regard the UK Office as again a really crucial comedy sitcom for defining what became British comedy for ever since, really. So when they announced this Australian version that was starring Felicity Ward in the sort of David Brent, Michael Scott lead of the Office role, people were concerned. People thought that, it wasn't going to work out and it wasn't necessarily going to land as well as the previous versions would. But having watched The Office Australia, I actually thought it was okay. There is funny stuff in there. It is very copy and paste per se. The characters, the dynamics are all very similar. There is a Jim and Pam or a Tim and Dawn, depending on which preference of UK US you prefer. That relationship exists. Although this time they're both sales reps off the bat. There is the sort of Dwight Gareth figure, but this time played by a female, and they're a receptionist. And again, the characters do have the same prank wars and similar dynamics that made everyone love the UK and US office. So it's interesting because it follows this traditional model, but it does manage to slowly find its feet as the program goes on. For me, I thought it was as good as some of the less good episodes of the US Office. Now, I've watched the US Office a couple of times. I can't pretend to be as loyal to the UK Office as others might, but from a US Office perspective, I think the Australian Office does match some of the episodes in the show. I think this is a good thing because there's only 8 episodes in season 1 of the Australian Office. And it's pretty easy to forget that the US Office really struggled in its first season with a similar thing. It was trying to recreate the UK Office and it didn't quite land. And it wasn't until they found their footing that they managed to get the show to become the huge success that it was. So I've got high hopes for the Australian Office if it manages to get another season. As I mentioned before, the show is billed as being female led. And to be honest, if I hadn't read the reviews and some of them potentially more negative comments online about it being female led, I don't think it's something that I would have noticed in particular. The show manages to do that without sort of rubbing it in the face. It's clearly trying to establish its own characters, its own dynamics, its own relationships. And so far from what I've seen, that works for the show. I've read a couple of reviews so far, and a lot of them are comparing it to the UK and US Office, understandably. And I think that's difficult because I think the marketing for the show wasn't as strong as it could have necessarily been. I can't even remember how I found out about it. I think it was through social media. And I think those reviews will then potentially have its impacting factor on fans that don't necessarily know about it. But I think if you can push past it, which I think some of the critic reviews do, there is a good premise there that is different enough from the UK and the US versions to potentially find its feet. They are doing the Office mockumentary style in an era of working from home and remote working and all things like that never came up in the US or UK versions, just from the era of the time. And a lot of people have said whether the Michael Scott, David Brent characters would work in the same way, and I think Felicity Ward does a really good job as Hannah, that character in sort of leading the office, and it does work. So I think overall, I think if you are a fan of the UK office, I think if you are a fan of the US office, then it's worth giving a try. As I said, it's on Amazon Prime, pretty much everywhere across the world. For me personally, The Office has always been a program that you can watch very easily with minimal thinking and minimal thought. It's just a nice light program that often has one or two laughs an episode, and I think the Australian Office so far fits that mold. It's still the same length, it's still the same style, it's still shot with similar sense of humor, and I think it's worth giving a go. I've given it a 3 out of 5. The groundwork is there for the show to develop, just like the US office got the chance to. And if you want to give it a go, head over to Amazon Prime and you can find it on there. Thanks so much for watching. If you've seen the US office and you're worried about the Australian office being bad, tell me why in the comments below. If you've watched the Australian office, what do you think? I'm intrigued to know what more people are thinking about this show, but as I mentioned, I don't think many people know that it exists, so pretty much none of my friends have watched it so far. And if you like this review, give it a like and maybe give a subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.